Across the void of space, on countless worlds, a single message crackles to life on every screen, every speaker. It's a warning broadcast in thousands of languages. Do not engage. Do not interfere. The message is from the Karthik's Dominion, a military empire that has crushed entire civilizations. Their target is a small, unassuming blue planet in a quiet sector of the galaxy, Earth. Massive obsidian ships, like daggers aimed at the heart of our home, tear through the fabric of space-time, appearing in orbit around Earth. Their fleet eclipses the sun. A voice cold and arrogant booms across our planet's communication channels. They demand our unconditional surrender. They speak of our planet's resources, our strategic location, and our inevitable subjugation. They give us one cycle to comply. The leaders of Earth, representing a united world, send back a simple, two-word reply: we refuse. The Karthik's commander, likely amused by our defiance, decides a demonstration is in order. A single beam of incandescent energy lances out from their flagship. It doesn't strike Earth, it strikes our silent, cratered companion, the Moon. The impact is catastrophic. A new glowing crater is carved into its surface, and a colossal plume of dust and rock is ejected into space. A scar visible to the naked eye from Earth. The message is clear. This is a taste of our power. The next one will not miss. Then, silence. For 2 days, the Dominion fleet hangs in our sky, a terrifying monument to our impending doom. On Earth there's fear, yes, but also a quiet, simmering resolve. Then something extraordinary begins to happen. On the third day, the long-range sensors of the Karthik's fleet start to scream. One anomaly appears, then 10, then 100. Thousands of them, pouring into the Sol system from every direction. They are not Karthik's ships. They are human. They are massive, city-sized freighters, scarred from 1,000 trade runs, sleek, agile corporate couriers, grimy, rugged mining vessels from distant asteroid belts, and alongside them an array of warships, from small, nimble patrol craft to massive, battle-hardened dreadnoughts of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. Ships from every human colony, every outpost, every corner of the galaxy we had touched. They form a ring around the Karthiks, a wall of steel and unity. And then a new message is broadcast. It doesn't come from Earth, it comes from every single human ship in the system, a chorus of thousands of voices speaking as one. It echoes through the Karthik's command bridge, overriding their systems. The words are calm, chilling, and filled with an unbreakable promise. Congratulations, Karthik's Dominion. You have declared war on humanity. On the bridge of the Karthik's flagship, the arrogant commander's expression finally changes. The data streams in, showing the sheer scale of the fleet they now face. The realization dawns, cold and terrible. They hadn't attacked an isolated, primitive world. They had kicked a hornet's nest the size of a nebula. They had not come to conquer a planet. They had picked a fight with an entire species, scattered across the stars, but bound by an unbreakable will. The first Dominion officer who realized something was wrong didn't shout. He simply stared at the sensor screen, his claws frozen above the controls. General, you need to see this. On the command bridge of the Dominion flagship Iron Wrath, High General Varkash slowly turned his towering frame toward the tactical display. At first, the screen looked normal. The Sol system glowed in the center of the hologram. Mars drifted nearby, and the Dominion fleet hovered confidently in formation, 12 massive warships positioned like predators waiting for their prey to surrender. Then the outer edges of the display began to flicker. Small lights appeared. 1, 2, 10. The officer adjusted the sensor range. The number jumped to 50. Another officer leaned forward. Are those asteroids? No, the sensor operator said quietly. He zoomed the display out further. More lights appeared, hundreds. The bridge grew silent. Varkash stepped closer to the holographic display, studying the incoming signals. They're ships, another officer said. But they're not warships. That much was obvious. Their sensor signatures were inconsistent. Some were tiny. Others were large cargo haulers. Many of them lacked proper combat systems, civilian ships, mining transports, old patrol vessels, exploration craft. Thousands of them. all approaching the Dominion fleet. Valkash narrowed his eyes. Identify the origin. The sensors process the information. Multiple systems, the officer replied. Human colonies, trade stations, mining outposts. Even deep exploration routes. Another officer turned slowly toward the general. They're coming from everywhere. On the holographic map, the Sol system was beginning to fill with approaching signals. Ships pouring in from every direction, and none of them was slowing down. For a long moment, the bridge remained silent. Then one of the younger officers spoke hesitantly. General, are they surrendering? A few nervous chuckles echoed through the bridge. Varkash did not laugh. Open a channel, he ordered. Moments later, a broadcast signal spread across the incoming human ships. This is High General Varkash of the Karthik's Dominion. His deep voice thundered across space. You are approaching a military operation. Turn away immediately or you will be destroyed. The message repeated across dozens of communication bands. No response came. But the ships kept coming. Thousands of tiny lights moving closer across the tactical display. The sensor officer cleared his throat. General, they're accelerating. Varkash's eyes hardened. Prepare weapons. Across the Dominion fleet, colossal cannons rotated slowly toward the incoming swarm. These were weapons capable of vaporizing cruisers. Against proper warships, the battle would have lasted minutes. But the vessels approaching them weren't warships. They were barely armed, which made the situation confusing. Why would civilians attack a military fleet? One officer muttered. Another answered quietly. Maybe they're desperate. The distance between the fleets continued shrinking. 5 million kilometers. 4 million. 3. Then something unexpected happened. One of the human ships moved ahead of the others. It was small, barely larger than a shuttle. Its engines burned brightly as it accelerated directly toward the Dominion formation. Intercept course, the sensor officer reported. Destroy it, Varkash ordered. A Dominion turret fired. The beam of energy cut through space and struck the tiny ship instantly. The vessel vanished in a brief flash of light. The bridge fell silent again, but the human fleet did not stop. More ships continued advancing. 2,000 vessels now filled the tactical display. Another small ship suddenly broke formation and accelerated forward. Then another, and another. Varkash watched as several human ships surged toward the Dominion fleet at impossible speed. What are they doing? An officer whispered. The answer came seconds later. The first human ship reached the edge of the Dominion formation. Its engines flared one last time. Then the vessel detonated. The explosion wasn't large enough to damage a Dominion warship, but it was powerful enough to disrupt the ship's shield grid for several seconds. Another human ship slammed into a Dominion cruiser moments later. Another explosion, then another. Suddenly the sensor officer's voice rose in alarm. Multiple collision courses. The bridge erupted with activity. Human ships were accelerating directly into the Dominion fleet, not firing weapons. Not launching missiles, just ramming. Thousands of them. Old freighters. Mining craft, cargo transports. Ships that had no chance of surviving. And yet they kept coming. One Dominion destroyer rocked violently as a heavy cargo hauler slammed into its shield barrier. The impact overloaded several shield generators, forcing the ship to divert power. Another human vessel exploded beneath the engines of a cruiser, flooding its sensors with interference. They're using suicide strikes, an officer shouted. Varkash stared at the display in disbelief. No advanced civilization fought like this. No rational military used civilian ships as weapons. And yet the humans were doing exactly that. More ships were arriving every minute. 5,000 now, 10,000. The Sol system was filling with them. Not a coordinated fleet, not a professional military. Just humanity, every ship they had. Every pilot willing to fly. The sensor officer suddenly froze. General. Varkash turned sharply. What? The officer slowly pointed to the edge of the holographic display. New signals were appearing. Different from the others, larger, stronger, warships, human warships, hundreds of them. They had stayed hidden behind a wave of civilian ships, using the chaos as cover. and now they were moving into attack position. The officer's voice trembled. General, I think the civilians were never meant to win. Varkash finally understood. The human swarm had only been the first move. A distraction, a shield, a sacrifice. And now the real fleet of humanity was arriving. The Dominion had expected fear. They had expected surrender. Instead, they had awakened a species willing to throw everything into the fight. And the battle for Earth had only just begun. For the first time in decades of warfare, High General Varkash felt something unfamiliar creeping into his thoughts. Uncertainty. The tactical display above the bridge of the Iron Wrath was no longer clean and orderly. It was chaos. Thousands of human vessels flooded the Sol system like a living storm, their signals overlapping, colliding, vanishing as explosions rippled through space. Dominion weapons fired continuously. Massive beams of plasma carved glowing lines through the swarm, destroying dozens of ships with each blast. Yet the humans kept coming. Cargo ships slammed into shield barriers. Mining vessels detonated against armored hulls. Small shuttles darted through gaps in the Dominion formation, forcing the massive warships to constantly adjust their defenses. None of it should have worked. No military doctrine in the galaxy allowed for such reckless tactics. But the results were undeniable. Shields on the Varric Talon are fluctuating. One officer shouted. Another alarm sounded. Cruiser Kath Dominion 2 reporting engine disruption. The Dominion fleet had come expecting a clean, controlled invasion. Instead, they were fighting a storm of unpredictable attackers. Varkash clenched his claws behind his back as he watched the display. These ships are worthless, one of his officers said nervously. They are destroying themselves just to slow us down. Varkash's eyes narrowed. Exactly. The officer hesitated. General? They are not trying to win, Varkash said slowly. Another explosion shook the holographic map as a human freighter rammed the shield of a Dominion destroyer. They are buying time. As if summoned by those words, the sensor officer suddenly straightened in his chair. New contacts. Everyone on the bridge turned toward the display. At the outer edge of the Sol system, beyond the chaotic swarm of civilian ships, a new formation was appearing. Large, organized, military, human warships. Dozens of them, then hundreds. They emerged from jump space in perfect synchronization, their engines glowing like distant stars as they moved into formation. Unlike the civilian vessels, these ships were built for war. Sleek destroyers, heavy cruisers, carrier platforms surrounded by wings of fighters. They did not rush forward recklessly. They advanced slowly, patiently, like hunters waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One Dominion officer swallowed nervously. How many? The sensor officer stared at the numbers rising across his console. 200 confirmed. More signals appeared. 300, then 400. The bridge grew quiet. Because this was not the small defensive fleet the Dominion had expected to face near Earth. This was a real military force. Varkash leaned closer to the display, studying the human formation carefully. They waited, he murmured. The civilian swarm had forced the Dominion fleet to divide its attention, fire its weapons constantly, and reposition its defenses. Their shield systems were strained. Their sensors were overloaded. Their formation was no longer perfect. And now the human warships were arriving. The realization spread across the bridge like cold air. We've been distracted, one officer said quietly. Not distracted, Varkash corrected. Prepared. As the human warships moved closer, a new transmission suddenly broke through the communication channels. The Dominion bridge immediately tried to block it, but the signal forced its way through. A human face appeared on the main screen. A woman wearing the dark uniform of the Terran fleet. Her expression was calm, too calm. Dominion fleet, she said clearly. This is Admiral Elena Carter of the United Terran Defense Command. Several Dominion officers stared at the screen with disbelief. Humans rarely communicated during battle. They fought quietly, efficiently, but this human admiral seemed composed, almost relaxed. You fired the first shot, Carter continued. You struck our moon and threatened our home. Varkash stepped forward, towering before the screen. You will surrender, he growled. or your planet will burn." For a brief moment, the human admiral said nothing. Then she smiled, not a friendly smile, a calm one. "You still don't understand," she said. Behind her, the screen shifted to show a wider view of the Terran fleet assembling in the distance. More ships were still arriving. The numbers were climbing. 500, 600, 700. "You came to conquer one world," Carter said. "But humanity isn't just one world anymore." The hologram expanded again. New signals appeared across the map. Human colonies, stations, hidden bases scattered across nearby systems. And ships were leaving all of them. Hundreds more warships were already on their way to Sol. Varkash's claws tightened. "You cannot win this war." Admiral Carter's voice remained steady. "We don't need to win today." Her gaze hardened. "We just need to make sure you lose." Before Varkash could respond, the human fleet suddenly moved. Hundreds of Terran warships accelerated at once, their engines blazing as they surged forward through the debris of destroyed civilian ships. Fighter squadrons launched from carriers like swarms of silver insects. Missiles streaked across space. Railgun rounds flashed like lightning. The first organized human attack slammed into the Dominion fleet, and for the first time since entering the Sol system, a Dominion warship exploded. The bridge of the Iron Wrath fell silent as fragments of black armor drifted through space where the destroyer had been. One officer whispered the thought none of them had expected to feel. "Humans are actually fighting back." But Admiral Carter's final words still echoed across the bridge. Humanity didn't need to win today. They only needed the Dominion to lose. And the battle had only just begun. Varkash, High General of the Galactic Imperium, watched the holographic display with a sense of detached amusement. The human fleet, a pitiful collection of repurposed freighters and outdated cruisers, was arrayed before his glorious armada. His ships, the pinnacle of 1,000 years of technological dominance, gleamed with power. They were living weapons, their hulls forged from neutronium alloys, their cannons capable of cracking moons. This wouldn't be a battle, it would be an execution. A lesson in cosmic hierarchy. He gave the order. A wave of plasma lances, impossibly bright, tore through the void. The human vanguard evaporated. But then, something unexpected happened. The remaining human ships didn't break. They didn't scatter. Instead, they tightened their formation, pivoting with a speed that defied their bulky designs. Tiny corvettes, little more than engine blocks with guns attached, darted into the gaps, their point defense lasers spitting defiance. They were not an annoyance, but a coordinated one. Varkash dismissed it as the last gasp of a doomed species. He ordered a pincer movement, his two largest dreadnoughts moving to crush the human formation between them. This was a classic, unbeatable maneuver. Yet, as his dreadnoughts closed in, the human fleet split. Half surged forward directly at his command ship, the Indomitable. The other half fell back, drawing one of the dreadnoughts into a dense asteroid field. It was a foolish move. His scanners showed the field was unstable, riddled with volatile gas pockets. The human ships that charged his flagship were annihilated, of course. Their sacrificial run barely scratched the Indomitable's shields. Varkash felt a pang of, not pity, but confusion. What was the point of such a meaningless gesture? Then the report came in. The second dreadnought, the Unstoppable, was in trouble. The humans it had chased into the asteroid field weren't fighting it. They were herding it. They used precise microbursts from their engines and tactical missile strikes not on the dreadnought, but on the asteroids around it, creating a chain reaction. Varkash watched in disbelief as a massive asteroid, destabilized by a series of perfectly timed explosions, slammed into the Unstoppable's port side. Its shields flared, held for a moment, and then collapsed. Secondary explosions ripped along its hull as the volatile gas pockets the humans had targeted ignited. The pride of his fleet, a vessel that had subjugated entire star systems, was crippled by rocks and a handful of glorified shuttles. Anger, cold and sharp, replaced Varkash's amusement. This wasn't strategy, it was chaos, it was illogical. He ordered the rest of his fleet to advance, a single, overwhelming wall of firepower. No more maneuvers, no more tactics. just pure, irresistible force. He would crush them under the weight of his superiority. The human fleet responded in a way that defied all military doctrine. They didn't retreat or consolidate. Instead, they broke apart into dozens of small independent squads. They scattered like seeds in the wind, each group moving with its own seemingly random agenda. Some engaged his destroyers in close-range knife fights, others laid minefields in the path of his cruisers, and a few simply vanished from his sensors, their heat signatures masked by the debris of the earlier fighting. It was maddening. His command structure, designed to direct a unified, powerful force, was struggling to track and counter so many disparate threats. For every human squad he cornered and destroyed, two more would appear somewhere else, striking at a weak point he hadn't even realized he had. They were using their own weakness, their lack of a rigid command hierarchy, as a weapon. Each human captain was a general, making life or death decisions in an instant. Then came the message. It wasn't a plea for surrender. It was broadcast on an open channel for all his ships to hear. A human voice, calm and resolute. General Volkesh, you fight a war of numbers. You believe victory is an equation to be solved with superior firepower. We don't. For us, war is a conversation. And right now we are dictating the terms. As the voice spoke, Volkesh's tactical display lit up with new warnings. The lost human ships hadn't been hiding. They had performed a long, silent burn, circling his entire formation, and they weren't alone. From the dark space behind his fleet, a new wave of contacts appeared. Civilian ships, miners, cargo haulers, colony transports, hundreds of them, retrofitted with whatever makeshift weapons they could carry. They weren't a threat, not in a real fight, but they were a war. They had boxed him in. Volkesh finally understood. The initial sacrificial charge, the asteroid trap, the chaotic dispersal, it was all a distraction. It was all a performance designed to buy time and to pull his fleet into a position of their choosing. The humans weren't trying to win a battle of annihilation. They couldn't. They were fighting a battle of attrition, not of ships, but of will. He looked at his fleet, still vastly superior, still capable of wiping out the enemy 10 times over. But they were now mired in a chaotic multi-front engagement surrounded by a swarm of gnats, with their escape route clogged by a civilian blockade. His perfectly logical, technologically supreme war machine had been lured into a brawl in a dark alley. The human commander's voice returned, a final, chilling statement. You can destroy us, General, but you will not leave this system. Every ship you kill will cost you. Every second you spend here, more of our pitiful ships will arrive. You wanted a lesson in cosmic hierarchy? Here it is. The will to survive will always outmaneuver the desire to conquer. For the first time in his long decorated career, Volkesh, High General of the Galactic Imperium, felt a sensation that was entirely new to him. It was not fear, it was respect, and the chilling realization that he had already lost. He had won every engagement, but he had lost the war the moment he underestimated the ingenuity of a species that refused to play by his rules. Our Dominion's victory was supposed to be absolute. Just as my simulations foretold, the first human ships crumbled, their fleets turning to cosmic dust before our might. 10,000 years of conquest had forged us into the undisputed masters of this galaxy. We were invincible, or so I believed. But then, something impossible happened. The human formation shifted. My tactical displays blazed with new energy signatures, weapons completely unknown to our archives. My bridge crew watched in stunned silence as our forward cruisers, the very pride of our fleet, were ripped apart by technologies that simply should not exist. The humans were adapting. Not over days or weeks, but in the heat of battle, second by second. Their strategy wasn't a pre-written plan. It was a living, evolving entity. All my perfect simulations, my centuries of tactical genius, became utterly worthless in a matter of minutes. They weren't just fighting back. They were learning, changing, forging themselves into a nightmare right before my eyes. I watched a single, heavily damaged human destroyer suddenly glow with an eerie, unknown energy. It accelerated to speeds I thought were physically impossible and rammed straight through our flagship's shields. This wasn't a battle for territory anymore. This was a battle for our very existence. If we cannot comprehend this enemy, this relentless human ingenuity, the Dominion will not just be defeated. It will be erased from history. The Dominion fleet had been shattered, but the humans were far from finished. High General Varkesh watched the displays aboard the Iron Raft as his ships struggled to regroup. The fleet was no longer a unified force. Gaps had formed between cruisers and shields flickered under constant bombardment from human railguns and plasma salvos. Still, the Dominion had firepower, massive energy beams, missiles and boarding detachments, but nothing could match the human combination of unpredictability and sheer determination. Varkesh gritted his teeth. "They are clever," he muttered, "but clever alone cannot win a war." A young officer approached nervously, sweat dripping from his brow. "General, new readings? There's something else. We don't recognize it. Energy signatures, unlike anything we've seen." Varkesh turned sharply. "Explain." The officer hesitated. "Massive deployment from Earth itself, not just ships. Some kind of new weapon platforms. They're launching energy constructs, shields, possibly orbital weapon arrays. It's unlike anything in our tactical database." Varkesh's eyes narrowed. "Prepare countermeasures. Deploy interceptors. Focus all firepower." He didn't need to wait long to see why. From Earth, orbital platforms emerged, hidden from Dominion detection until this exact moment. Some were enormous, dwarfing even the largest human carriers. Others were smaller but incredibly dense, armored with materials unknown to the Dominion. Energy beams lashed outward, striking ships that had survived the initial human fleet assaults. Explosions erupted across the formation, creating cascading chaos. The Dominion warships tried to retaliate, but the humans had already anticipated their every move. Some platforms emitted electromagnetic pulses, disabling weapon systems on multiple Dominion vessels at once. Others launched swarms of drones, which swirled around the enemy, cutting off navigation and causing collisions. Varkesh's claws shook as he slammed them against the console. This isn't conventional warfare," he growled. "What is this?" The tactical officer's face was pale. "They call it combined arms strategy. But it's unlike anything we've seen. Ground to orbit, orbital weapons, swarm tactics, sacrificial vessels. Everything is coordinated to weaken and isolate our ships before the main strike hits." Varkesh exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the rapidly approaching human dreadnoughts. "So they've integrated their technology, their fleet, and even their planet itself into the battle. They're making Earth part of the war effort." The officer swallowed. "Yes, sir. And it's working. The Dominion left flank is collapsing." At that moment, a human dreadnought launched a sudden assault, firing multiple massive beams into the center of the Dominion formation. Explosions tore through the warships, and the initial shockwaves disabled several of their forward shields. Fighters darted from the human carriers, striking exposed engines and turrets, while smaller vessels rammed weakened hulls to create breaches. Varkesh's officers were frantic, trying to issue orders faster than the battle could move. "Divert shields, fire secondary batteries, launch counter drones." Every action was anticipated, every reaction accounted for. The Dominion's most advanced warships were faltering under the sheer unpredictability of human tactics. From the corner of the bridge, a communications officer spoke hesitantly. "General, new transmissions from Earth, it's a broadcast." Varkesh gestured sharply. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered, and a human voice filled the bridge, calm and unwavering. "Hi, General Varkesh," said Admiral Elena Carter, her expression unreadable. "You have underestimated humanity. We warned you when we said leave our system. You chose war. We have prepared for every eventuality, and now it is too late for you to change your mind." Varkesh growled, slamming his claw into the console. "We will crush you." Carter's gaze did not waver. Behind her, the full scale of the Terran orbital defenses became visible on the hologram. Energy arrays, drone swarms, and deployment points glowed in precise patterns, all targeting vulnerable points in the Dominion formation. "And yet," she continued, "we fight not just to defend our home. We fight to ensure the galaxy remembers that you cannot threaten humanity without consequences." Farkash's jaw tightened. For the first time, he realized the full extent of human preparation. This war was no longer about the Dominion seizing a planet. It was about humanity reshaping the rules of warfare itself. The Iron Wrath fired its weapons, massive beams lancing toward the nearest dreadnought. But the attack barely disrupted the formation. Human platforms released countermeasures that absorbed and redirected the energy, while fighters swarmed in waves, cutting off vulnerable sections. Farkash's claws flexed in frustration. "Prepare boarding teams! Strike their carriers directly!" Another explosion rocked the flagship. A human frigate ramming at high velocity had breached the outer hull of a Dominion cruiser, detonating inside and crippling its engines. The Dominion fleet was no longer attacking effectively, it was responding desperately. Farkash understood now. The humans had done what no other species had, turned the battlefield itself into a weapon. Ships, orbital defenses, planetary resources, all were integrated into a single, unstoppable strategy. And yet, even in the face of such overwhelming preparation, humanity was not reckless. Every strike was precise. Every loss was calculated. Every move designed to maximize the Dominion's disarray. Farkash's teeth clenched. This is war unlike any we faced. Humanity doesn't just fight, they adapt, they innovate, they endure. And every step they take drags us closer to defeat. Across the Sol system, the human fleet surged forward once more, coordinated, relentless, and unstoppable. The Dominion had learned a terrifying truth. You cannot crush humanity with conventional power. You can only survive them if you adapt or perish. And Farkash knew, deep in his core, that survival was no longer guaranteed. Humanity had unveiled their first secret weapon, and it had changed the battle forever. The year is 2242. For a generation, humanity has known peace, expanding across the Orion Arm, forging a new future among the stars. But that peace was shattered. From the void they came. A fleet of unimaginable size and power, calling themselves the Dominion. Their message was simple: surrender or be annihilated. We chose to fight. This is the story of the battle for Sol. It began at the edge of our system, near Neptune's orbit. Our outer defense grid, the Trident Line, was the first to fall. 300 state-of-the-art battle stations, vaporized in minutes. The Dominion's weapons were unlike anything we'd ever seen. They fired lances of pure energy that bypassed our shields as if they weren't there. Panic rippled through the command centers on Earth and Mars. This wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Admiral Eva Rostova aboard the flagship UN's Defiance knew we couldn't win a direct fight. Our ships were slower, our weapons weaker. But humans have always been resourceful. We have a spirit the Dominion couldn't measure. Rostova formulated a desperate plan, codenamed Broken Arrow. The objective wasn't to destroy the enemy fleet, but to cripple their command ship, the colossal vessel they called the Harbinger, the entire human fleet. Everything we had left was pulled back to form a defensive sphere around Earth. It was a terrifying gamble. We were offering up our homeworld as bait. As the Dominion fleet closed in, their arrogance was their undoing. They saw our retreat as a sign of surrender, pushing their flagship ahead of its support vessels, eager to claim the prize. That's when Rostova gave the order. From hidden positions within the asteroid belt and behind the dark side of Jupiter, our secret weapon was unleashed. A swarm of thousands of repurposed mining drones, small, fast, and armed with single-use plasma charges. They weren't powerful enough to destroy a warship, but they didn't need to be. Their target was the Harbinger's exposed engine array. The swarm descended like a storm of metal locusts. The Dominion's point defense cannons, designed to target capital ships, couldn't track the thousands of tiny, erratic drones. Explosions erupted across the Harbinger's stern. Its engines sputtered, faltered, and then went dark. The behemoth was adrift, its main weapon systems offline. Seeing their command ship crippled, the Dominion fleet hesitated. It was the moment Rostova had been waiting for. All ships, full thrust. Target the Harbinger. For Earth. The human fleet surged forward. Our destroyers and cruisers, once outmarched, now swarmed the disabled flagship. We threw everything we had at it. Torpedoes, railgun slugs, laser cannons. The Defiance itself led the charge, its spinal-mounted cannon firing shot after shot into the heart of the enemy vessel. The battle raged for 18 brutal hours. We lost ships. We lost heroes, but we never lost hope. Finally, with a blinding flash that lit up the void, the Harbinger's core went critical. It broke apart, a dying star in our own backyard. The rest of the Dominion fleet, leaderless and shocked, disengaged and retreated back into the darkness they came from. We had won. We had held the line. The battle for Seoul would be remembered as humanity's finest hour. We proved that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit will not be extinguished. The Dominion fleet was unraveling faster than anyone aboard the Iron Wrath could process. High General Varkash had commanded countless campaigns, yet nothing had prepared him for this. Entire cruisers drifted in silence, crippled by human attacks. Shield generators were failing across multiple ships, engines sputtered, and weapons arrays were offline. The Dominion's advanced tactics, once considered unbeatable, were no match for the humans' unorthodox approach. On the bridge, officers shouted over alarms, trying to coordinate surviving ships. "General! Cruiser Varig Talon is losing power. Weapons offline." Varkesh's voice was a low growl. "Hold formation. Divert all available power to critical systems." Even as he spoke, another explosion rocked the flagship. A human dreadnought had fired a concentrated beam, tearing a Dominion frigate in half. Fighter squadrons launched from nearby human carriers, swarming and disabling defense systems before the Dominion could react. "This isn't just a fleet," an officer muttered. It's an entire civilization fighting as one. Every ship, every platform, every colony contributing to the battle." Varkash clenched his claws. "They are redefining war. Across the Sol system, humans had begun their next phase. Orbital platforms that had remained hidden now emitted high-intensity energy pulses, disrupting Dominion shields and sensors. Smaller human craft used these openings to strike at the weakest points of the fleet. Suicidal ramming attacks continued, but now with deadly precision, forcing Dominion vessels into defensive maneuvers that exposed them further. The Iron Wrath's tactical display was a cascade of red and yellow warning lights. Every move the Dominion made was anticipated. Every response was countered. Every advantage they had assumed was gone. Varkesh's officers were panicked. "Sir, we've lost cohesion. Ships are drifting apart. Communication channels are jammed. We can't maintain formation." Varkash exhaled slowly, trying to suppress the rage and fear that gnawed at him. "Then we adapt. We will survive. Or we will die trying." He turned toward the communications officer. "Open all channels. Attempt negotiation if possible. Humanity must understand the cost of this war." The officer hesitated. "Sir, they are not responding to standard communication. They're ignoring us, using our transmissions to feed misinformation, reroute fleets, and isolate our ships." Vaksh's eyes narrowed. "Then we fight blind." The battle outside had become a storm of destruction. Human dreadnoughts advanced in perfect formation, shielding smaller ships with their bulk. Fighters darted through Dominion formations, disabling engines and weapons systems. Orbital platforms fired in precise patterns, overwhelming even the most heavily armored vessels. The Dominion fleet's losses mounted rapidly. Cruisers collided while attempting evasive maneuvers. Destroyers were isolated and destroyed one by one. Even the flagship Iron Wrath had sustained significant damage, its shields flickering under continuous fire. Varkash realized the horrifying truth. Humanity had turned every system, every fleet, every resource into a weapon. They had taken the chaos of battle and made it their ally. Every ship that fell, every strike that seemed reckless, was calculated to manipulate Dominion forces into weakness. One officer whispered, voice trembling, "General, they're not just fighting, they're teaching us how powerless we are against them." Varkash's jaw clenched. For the first time, he felt the full weight of the galaxy's whispered warnings. Humans were not just survivors, they were predators in a form no Dominion commander had ever imagined. A massive energy pulse rippled across the system, temporarily disabling several Dominion ships. Explosions followed as human dreadnoughts pressed forward. Fighters swarmed weakened cruisers, boarding them and sabotaging internal systems with surgical precision. Varkash's mind raced. The Dominion had underestimated humans, and now the consequences were undeniable. Entire systems that were once safe supply lines now bristled with human defenses. Every colony, every hidden base, every planet capable of supporting life had contributed to the war effort. The officer spoke again, voice trembling. "Sir, the fleet is collapsing. This isn't just a battle. It's a rout." Varkash stood silently, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The reality was inescapable. The Dominion's most powerful armada was failing. Their dominance, once unquestioned, was crumbling under a species they had assumed weak. Across the Sol system, human forces pressed relentlessly. The Dominion had come expecting surrender. Humanity had responded with ingenuity, courage, and unity. And in doing so, they were teaching the galaxy a new truth. You cannot conquer a species that refuses to be conquered. Varkash's voice was low, almost a whisper. We underestimated them. And now we will pay the price. Outside, the humans continued their advance. The Dominion fleet was on the brink of collapse. The galaxy had never witnessed such a comeback, and for the first time, it was clear that humanity was not just fighting to survive, they were fighting to reshape the balance of power forever. And the Dominion would never recover from this. The Dominion fleet was in ruins. High General Varkash stood on the bridge of the Iron Wrath, staring at the holographic map of Sol System. What had once been a proud armada now resembled a shattered constellation, scattered across space in fragments, drifting without cohesion. Explosions and debris streaked through the void, reminders of every miscalculated attack, every human maneuver that had torn through their defenses. Varkash clenched his claws, the black metal of the console rattling beneath them. For centuries, the Dominion had known fear only as a tool used against weaker species. They had crushed armies, obliterated planets, and bent entire civilizations under their will. But this was different. Humanity fought in ways the Dominion could not anticipate, could not comprehend, and could not counter effectively. "Sir," one officer whispered, barely audible over the alarms, "our fleet, it's disintegrating. Communications are failing. Several capital ships are unresponsive. Even the flagship systems are compromised." Varkash's voice was low, deadly calm. "Then we fight to the last vessel. Humanity will not break us unless we allow it. Rally every ship capable of movement. Concentrate fire on their dreadnoughts. Every moment we survive gives us a chance to adapt." Outside, human fleets moved with relentless precision. Dreadnoughts formed layers of defense around carriers. Fighters swarmed Dominion vessels like silver storms, ramming, disabling, and overwhelming. Orbital platforms unleashed coordinated energy volleys that crippled cruisers in seconds. Even the remnants of the Dominion's advanced weapons were rendered almost useless, intercepted, absorbed, or redirected by human technology. A senior officer approached nervously. "General, Earth itself is mobilizing. Their orbital defenses, planetary installations. Entire continents have deployed automated weapon systems targeting our remaining fleet." Vaksh's gaze hardened. "Then we fight in their environment. No mercy, no hesitation. Every strike must count." The first human dreadnought surged forward, its massive engines illuminating the battlefield. Railguns fired, obliterating a Dominion destroyer mid-course. Fighter squadrons launched in waves, cutting off repair teams, and sabotaging secondary weapon arrays. Each human attack was precise, deliberate, and devastating. Varkash felt a rare emotion creeping in respect. But there was no time for admiration. The Dominion fleet was on the brink of annihilation. Every officer knew it. Every sensor reading confirmed it. Humanity had turned their desperation into a weapon, their courage into strategy, and their home into an impenetrable fortress. "Sir," another officer said, voice trembling, "we've received incoming transmissions. Humans, they're speaking to our fleet directly." The bridge fell silent. A holographic image appeared, Admiral Elena Carter, calm and unwavering. Behind her, the full scale of the Terran fleet and orbital defenses was visible. Her voice was steady. "High General Varkash," she said, Your forces have demonstrated discipline and power, but your campaign ends here. Humanity does not beg for survival. We do not negotiate surrender. You have chosen war, and now you will experience the consequences of underestimating us. Vakash's claws flexed, the console trembling under his grip. We will not surrender, he growled. Even if we fall, the Dominion endures. Carter's eyes hardened. The Dominion endures only if it can adapt. Humanity adapts faster, strikes harder, and sacrifices willingly. Your arrogance brought you here. Your failure will be remembered across the galaxy. In a coordinated surge, human carriers launched their final assault. Thousands of fighters swarmed weakened cruisers. Dreadnoughts unleashed focused energy beams that shattered shields, tore hulls apart, and left Dominion ships drifting lifelessly. Orbital platforms fired with surgical precision, cutting off reinforcements and isolating remaining capital ships. Varkash realized the inevitable. The Dominion fleet would not survive the day. Every tactic, every plan, every weapon had been countered. Humanity had taken what the Dominion considered strength and turned it against them. He turned to his officers, voice grim. Prepare for evacuation protocols. We will retreat if possible. Preserve what remains. Humanity has proven unstoppable. The fleet struggled to withdraw, but the human assault was relentless. Even damaged ships could not escape unscathed. The battlefield had become a graveyard of Dominion pride, scattered across space in a testament to human ingenuity and resolve. Varkash stood silently, staring at the holographic map. The Sol system was no longer a target, it was a fortress. Every human ship, every orbital defense, every citizen willing to fight had combined into a force no empire had ever faced. For the first time, the High General understood the truth the galaxy whispered, but few admitted aloud. Humans were not just survivors. They were warriors unlike any other, a force that could topple the strongest empires, a species no one could predict or contain. The Dominion had come to conquer one planet. Instead, they had awakened a species that would reshape the galaxy forever. Varkash's claws tightened. We underestimated them. And now the galaxy will pay the price for our arrogance. Outside, the humans pressed on. Relentless, unstoppable, and victorious. The Dominion's empire was crumbling. The war for Earth was ending. But the legend of humanity, the species that refused to surrender, was only beginning. The Dominion fleet was no more. High General Varkash stood on the bridge of the crippled Iron Wrath, staring at the black void of space where his ships had once ruled. Only a handful of vessels remained operational, drifting in scattered formation, engines damaged, weapons offline. The Dominion, the empire that had bent countless civilizations to its will, had been broken not by numbers, not by superior technology, but by a species it had underestimated, humanity. Outside the Sol system, the human fleet gleamed like a swarm of silver fire. Dreadnoughts, carriers, fighters, and orbital platforms, all coordinated, all relentless, filled the void. Each strike had been precise, each sacrifice deliberate. Humanity had turned desperation into strategy, chaos into advantage, and courage into a weapon the galaxy had never seen. A holographic transmission flickered on the Iron Wrath's bridge. Admiral Elena Carter appeared, calm, resolute, and unyielding. Behind her, the full Terran fleet stood ready. High General Varkash, she said, her voice steady, your fleet has demonstrated discipline and skill. But your empire's arrogance brought you here. You have waged war on humanity, and now you have faced the consequences. Surrender is no longer an option for your forces. Only survival remains for a fraction of your fleet, and only if you withdraw immediately. Vakash's massive claws flexed, his pride a storm raging within. We cannot accept this, he growled. The Dominion is eternal. Humanity cannot defeat us completely. Carter's eyes hardened. You have seen what humanity is capable of. We do not beg for mercy. We do not negotiate surrender. You invaded one world, thinking it isolated and weak. You have awakened a species that fights as one, sacrifices for one another, and adapts faster than any enemy in history. The Dominion has underestimated humans, and that mistake will echo through the galaxy. The Iron Wrath shuddered as nearby human dreadnoughts unleashed targeted volleys, forcing Barkash to divert power to shields. He glanced at the tactical display. The Dominion fleet's remaining vessels were scattered, crippled, and vulnerable. Every system humanity controlled had contributed to the defense: orbital weapons, hidden bases, reinforcements from colonies, even civilian ships transformed into shields and diversions. For the first time in his life, Barkash felt the true weight of defeat. Not just in ships lost or territory surrendered, but in something far deeper. The realization that humanity was not a species to conquer, control, or intimidate. Across the Sol system, human fighters darted through the void, ensuring no Dominion vessel could regroup effectively. Orbital platforms fired precise energy pulses that disabled remaining weapon systems. Dreadnoughts coordinated their movements, shielding carriers and protecting smaller craft, while boarding parties neutralized critical systems aboard Dominion ships that had not yet exploded. Every action was methodical, unrelenting, and calculated. Barkash turned to his officers. Prepare for retreat. Save what you can. The Dominion survives only if we live to fight another day. An officer hesitated. General, even if we escape, the Dominion's reputation, its dominance, it is broken. The galaxy is seeing what humans can do. Barkash did not answer. He could feel the truth of it. The Dominion's fearsome image, built over centuries, had been shattered in a single, coordinated human counteroffensive. The systems they had once ruled were now aware of a species that refused to submit, that fought with ingenuity and courage beyond expectation. Admiral Carter's voice echoed again across the transmission. Remember this, Barkash? Humanity will not bow, will not flee, and will not forget. The galaxy must understand one fact. You do not declare war on humanity without facing annihilation. Barkash exhaled slowly, the enormity of the situation settling over him. He had commanded fleets, conquered worlds, and struck fear into the hearts of billions. Yet here, facing a species he had assumed weak, he had learned a lesson no training could teach. Humans were not just survivors. They were a force unlike any other, a species that could change the balance of power across the stars. Outside the remaining Dominion ships, human vessels held position, shields blazing, engines ready. Every system had contributed, every sacrifice had been calculated, every maneuver precise. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary, a species that refused to surrender, that fought for survival and for one another with a courage and ingenuity unmatched in known history. High General Barkash stood in silence. The Dominion had come to conquer. Humanity had refused to be conquered. And in the shadows of the Sol system, the galaxy would never forget the lesson learned that day. You cannot declare war on humanity and live to tell the tale. The stars around Sol shimmered with human ships, a testament to determination, unity, and an unbreakable spirit. The war was over. The legend of humanity had begun, and the galaxy would tremble.